Okay, welcome back. So we're talking about the history of Unix and Linux. So what happened is the POSIX standard could be used as a blueprint, and that's exactly what one of these guys did. Linus Torvalds, who was getting his degree in computer science, decided as one of his projects he was going to use that blueprint and recreate basically the Unix core operating system from scratch. Now, he didn't use any of the source code from the existing Unix system. He just used the blueprint and figured it out on himself, because the blueprint was very specific on what had to happen. So Linux is not like on the tree, like the AT&T system and the BSD split off and then Linux came off the tree. No, it's not directly related to any of those things. It's sitting over here by itself. Now, there was another organization who was at the same time was rebuilding all of the commands, like the copy command and the list command and the move command and all the commands. And so they were working independently to come up with replacing all of the utilities with free, unencumbered, license-free versions of all the utilities. So when Linus had his operating system was just an OS. It had nothing. All it was an operating system. And so what happened is you combined the two projects. You had the project that was building the software pieces of all the commands, and then you had Linus putting together his things, and you put those together and they become a distribution. Okay, that's how it works. Now, so Linus didn't have access to the Unix source code. He came up with all this the same. Somebody else built all the commands. You combined them together, and here's where we are. Now, from our perspective, it doesn't really matter. I mean, really, if you're running, AT&T System 5 or BSD or Linux, quite frankly, who cares? I mean, you could just close your eyes and pretend like you're on one system and everything works. So from our perspective, from doing management, it doesn't really matter. If you learned on Linux and then you got a job where you were working on real honest-to-God AT&T System 5, you wouldn't have any trouble at all. And okay. So on page 9, they talk about the Linux-based versions that are out there, which is basically where we are. So Debian. Debian is one of the oldest distributions. It's not commercial. The one we're using is Ubuntu, which is based on Debian, but run by a company called Canonical. And so they provide support, they provide training and all sorts of other stuff. So it maybe you consider it better, but as far as the software is concerned, they're both using the same Linux core, and they're both using mostly the same utilities. Maybe they're packaging a little bit differently, but for the most part, the difference between running Debian raw or running Ubuntu is the fact that one is supported by a company and the other is not. Okay, that's about it. Red Hat. Now, Red Hat comes with a fee, but the fee is not really for the operating system. It's really for the support part, okay? Because they can't charge money for stuff that's free. It's against the rules. So what happens is they split, and CentOS, which is these guys right here, CentOS is one of the companies that basically is the free version of Red Hat. Okay. Now, there is one Unix-based system out there still today that's available. It's called FreeBSD. And most everyone else is Linux-based, but this guy is one of the few that are actually real honest-to-God Unix-based. One of the things that's kind of interesting is, if IBM had a supercomputer and they wanted to run their own special version of the operating system, most likely it's derived from either Unix or from Linux. One of the two. Excuse me. So you won't be able to download it or anything like that because it's dedicated for their hardware, their software. So it's not a distribution. You're not going to find it anywhere. Okay, cool beans. Okay, so some of the things you need to know about distributions, like maybe there's an assignment coming up that requires you to do this. Okay, so one of the things that you can use to differentiate between distributions is what package management system. Package management, basically all that is how do you go to the internet and pull down a thing that you need? Okay, I want to install software, so I go to some internet site and I pull down something, and it has to be in the right format. So Debian, and therefore Ubuntu, uses a thing called the Advanced Package Tool, APT. There's another one out there called RPM, which was really basically by the Red Hat team. Okay, so there's two competing package management systems out there. We're only going to be using APT. So if you want to learn both of them, that's okay. It's not that big of a deal. The commands they're not word for word the same, but the concepts are identical. Okay, so let's talk about commands. So I'm just gonna fake it. I'm gonna pretend like this is a Linux-based system, and so I'm just gonna fake some commands here. Okay, cool. So on the command line, you would basically type whatever it is you're trying to do. So, some command, and then a space, and then in the Windows world, you type something like C:\\Windows, and that would be whatever that command did. It would pass to it C:\\Windows. Okay, well, several things different in our world now. First of all, there are no drag letters, and secondly, the slashes go in the opposite direction. So in our world, it would be something like this, with the slash going in that direction. By the way, in the Windows world, these two things are identical, but not in the Linux world. The commands and the arguments are case sensitive. I know, kind of weird. Okay, so some command, and let's say I have an A option and a B option and a C option, and then Windows. So spaces are important. So if I tell it -A, that means turn on some A option. -B, -C. Now, so spaces are very, very important. You cannot cram these things together. When I teach this class on a face-to-face, I'll pop a command up on the screen and say, okay, everybody type this. And half of them won't be able to do it because they don't put the spaces in. I'm thinking, no, just follow exactly the way it is on the screen. Do not improvise. Do not ad-lib. Do exactly what it shows on the screen. And a lot of people have a tough time with that for whatever reason. Now, sometimes you can combine commands together. Options together. You can do an A, B, C Windows. Basically, that should be the same thing. The A option, the B option, and the C option could be collapsed together like that. That's a cool thing. Another thing that you're going to learn is if you wanted to go to the home, your home directory, like the same thing as your user profile in the Linux world, in the Windows world, use a tilde. That's right next to the 1 key. So that would be, go to my home directory. The other thing is, of course, command lines. So if I said, command whatever, C Windows, C asterisk. Asterisk is a wild card, and it basically means, go do whatever that is for everything that starts with the letter C. Okay, now don't freak out too much. I just wanted to give you a preview of this. We're going to go over this in a lot more detail when we get to the other book. So, bottom line is, some of the things that are weird is there are no file name extensions. Sure, you can have recipes.txt, sure, but txt doesn't mean anything. You could just say recipes. You don't have to use a file extension. In fact, we typically don't use file extensions in the Linux world. And you might think, well, wait a minute, isn't that going to be a little confusing? Yeah, okay, maybe. But believe it or not, the machine is smart enough to figure out that it's a text file. And when you do a listing of all the files, it'll color code those things to let you know what's a text file and what's not. So it's not quite as bad as you might think. One more time, the commands and the options and the file names, everything is case sensitive. Okay, so the next thing we need to talk about is units of measure. So on page 13, they start talking about basically how much is a megabyte. So here's table 1, 2. So a 1 KB file, a file that contains 1,000 bytes, maybe. 1 KIB, ooh, that's something that's got 4,096 bytes. So a KB could mean 1,000, or it could mean 1,024. And it's really kind of hard to tell. Let me give you a story. You go to Best Buy and you say, I'd like to buy a 16 gigabyte stick of RAM. And so they go to the store and they bring out a 16 gigabyte stick of RAM, and you're a happy camper. And you go, wait, while I'm here, I'd like to get a 16 gigabyte USB flash drive. And so you get one of them, and when you get them home, one of them is based on 1,000, and the other one of them is being based on 1,024. And both of them say 16 gigabyte. I know, it's crazy. So there was even a lawsuit, okay, back in the day, a million years ago, back when Windows 95 was coming out. You went and bought a 40 gigabyte hard drive, and you took it home and you stuck it into your Windows 95 machine, and it says, hey, you got 38 gigabytes. And people went, whoa, I'm being cheated. I paid for 40. Well, because Microsoft was using one unit of measure differently than the manufacturers. And so basically what they lost the lawsuit, by the way. The judge basically said, look, if you want to use mega, okay, like what what the standard definition of what mega actually means in real life, with the standard for metric system, then you just can't make up your own dang words. So they came up with new ones. So a kilobyte, K-I-B, megabyte, gigabyte, the I in there. Those are the things that absolutely, positively remove ambiguity. If I said 4 KIB, then there's no doubt at all what I'm talking about. If I don't use 4 KIB and I just said 4 KB, I don't really know. Anyway, the International Electrotechnical Commission, IEC, is the one who basically came up with this new naming convention. It's not all that prevalent, but thankfully, this book is these guys are, devotees, and so they don't mess around, and they use the correct words, the correct abbreviations in the book the entire time. I'm just telling you. So they know how to remove ambiguity, and so therefore you should too. On page 14, they talk about how do you get help? Because by the end of this, not this video, but the end of this series of videos, you're going to be installing Linux, and you're going to be dumped to a command line, and if you don't know how to do anything at all, you're just going to be staring at the command prompt waiting for the next chapter to pop up. So one of the things you can do is the Unix manuals. So there's everything in Linux, they try to make typing kind of small. So almost all commands are 2 letters or 3 letters long. Okay, so the copy command is not COPY, heaven forbid. That's too many letters. It's CP. The move command is not MOVE, it's MV. They abbreviate everything to make it easier for people who type. Okay, so the manuals are man. So it'd be man space whatever, copy, and then it'll spit out the manual page. So that's a good place to get stuff. You can kind of sort of tell that the folks who made this don't, they kind of said, well, we're at the command line, but we don't really like typing. There's other documentation on page 16. They talk about, you can go to this website called Help Ubuntu. Okay, we're coming up on the 15 minutes mark. We'll finish this chapter off in just a few.